Sarah. Welcome to the Genetic Genius podcast. I am so thrilled to have you as a guest.
Oh, hi, Dr. Lulu. Well, it's lovely to be here. Thanks for inviting.
Of course. And I can't wait for us to dive deep into red light therapy, how it supercharges your body and biohacks your DNA. But before we get all started with all that good stuff, let's talk about you. What's your background, like your story? How did you come to where you are now? What's your planetary?
My story is I actually started out in pharmaceutical research. So I started out as a research scientist at GlaxoSmithKline and really doing small projects, problem-solving projects that came up. And one of the problems was drug deposition in the lungs. They had some problem with one of the devices, one of the plastics. And that got me down a whole road of looking at the person's environment and how that affects what goes on in the body. Because we very quickly found out that the charge that the person is the thing that really determines how the drug works in the body. And to me, that was the start of it all, because it was fascinating. I was doing these experiments. I was being totally grounded. I had earthing straps. I had lab coats with black metal seams going through so that we could really look. And actually, the charge on the body has a massive impact in all kinds of things that happen in the body. And since then, I've looked at the science of grounding, and we could talk about that as a whole nother topic. But that's a very interesting science. But I then left the pharmaceutical industry and trained as a nutritionist, and which again, very interesting, but again, doesn't cover it. You need a more holistic approach. And I eventually ended up doing clinical neuroscience. So I had a master's in clinical neuroscience and went to California, and of course got involved in the whole biohacking movement. What was happening over there about 5 years ago, very interesting. Got to interview some very interesting people. And the most interesting thing that came out of all of that for me was light and how light interacts with the body. Because of course we have evolved under the sun. We are diurnal mammals. We're meant to be in a certain light environment, and we're not, of course. We lead very indoor lifestyles. So I've really spent the last 3 or 4 years focusing solely on the science of photobiomodulation, which is a very fancy word, which just means photo, light, bio, your biology, and modulation, to modify something. So really it means modifying your biology with light somehow. And there's all different aspects to that, but I mainly now look at red and near infrared light. Although sometimes I'm also looking at vitamin D production with UV, but really it's kind of mitting against this indoor lifestyle that we lead, using different technologies, but also being cognizant of, okay, you also need to spend some time outside. Yeah, I've gone from fairly science, then alternated some consciousness studies, some fairly fringe science, and now I've come back to, again, much more grounded science in the photobiomodulation field.
I love that, Sarah. I love how you talked about your journey, like from that science perspective, and then having that nutrition piece come in and learning more about the biology, and then also how experience in relationship to grounding. And that is so important for how our body is affected by light, like you were talking about. And I can't wait for us to talk more about that today. But thank you for sharing, because it's I love hearing that part of when I interview that journey. That's what makes it so special, to really hear how you got to where you are now.
That's right. Yeah, everybody comes from different places. I've just been at the biohacking conference here in Miami, which was awesome. But a lot of people are coming from a place of being sick and getting in. Is very interesting to have that experience. But say my experience has been more like following the science and taking different paths and seeing what happens.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I was supposed to go to that conference, but I just got back from Paris for a vacation, and I felt like that's going to be too much for me. But next time, I know they have lots of different ones, and that's a great one. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about red light therapy in general, so that we can set that like base for the listeners to understand. Cause I think that's where people lose it. They're like, what is light therapy? What is particularly red light therapy? And then there's also different forms, which we're going to talk about too. So what's that basis of red light?
Yeah. So really, when you're talking about light therapy, it's all about the wavelength. And the wavelength, of course, represents the color. So if you think about the spectrum that goes from, in England, where Richard of York gives battle in vain. So you have red, orange, yellow, indigo. But the wavelengths get longer as you go up that spectrum. So in the UV and the blue and the purple light, you have short wavelengths of light, and then they get slightly longer as you go up through green and yellow. And then the longest wavelengths are the red, and even longer near infrared. So we have a visible spectrum, that's colors we can see. And then outside of that, we also have invisible light. And then that's really, we determine that by the wavelength. So these different wavelengths of light have different physiological effects on them. And a lot of these are well documented, and a lot of people may have, light therapy sometimes seems to people a little bit esoteric. But if you think, about babies who were born with jaundice, they're under a blue light. I think most people now recognize recognize that as very credible science. It's in hospitals. It's been used for a long time.
Yeah.
The blue light is having a certain effect there on the bilirubin of those babies. Red light has a different effect because it's targeting different light receptors in the body. So actually our body is covered in light receptors for all the different wavelengths, which is no surprise. The sun has all the different wavelengths. So of course we're going to have receptors for different wavelengths. People are looking at different wavelengths of light and then seeing what that does in the body, and then how can we use that therapeutically. So the red and the near infrared is a very healing spectrum of light.
Yeah.
And we can really get into the mechanisms of how that works. But that's why a lot of devices that you'll see, the biohacking devices, the wellness devices, the home devices, a lot of those devices are using visible red and also the invisible near infrared light.
Yeah. Oh, great. That's such a wonderful explanation of kind of like how that light therapy works. And I like how you mentioned that now people are able to use these red light therapies at home in their own place, especially with the pandemic. The more things that we can do at home in our own environment to help with healing, the better. And I think we're seeing a big shift happen all over the planet with people taking charge and being empowered with their own healing, for sure. Yeah.
Yes,
great.
exactly. Home devices that are simple to use, non-invasive, non-toxic, that are supportive of the body's immune system. I think really that's where we're heading with a lot of these things.
Yeah. And people are waking up to learning how to use them, oh, wow, I could do this and I can have XYZ happen. I can help my detoxification process. And so when someone you talked about the different forms of that red light therapy. And so are there different specific forms that affect the healing of specific cells, or is it more general?
No, I think it's a fairly new field of science. And because it's not hugely funded at the present, people are still working out what's going on. So we're at the cutting edge here. So there are several theories so far on how light is working and which targeting. The main theory at the moment is that the main photoreceptor, certainly for red and near infrared light, is an enzyme called cytochrome C oxidase, which is found in the mitochondria. So cytochrome C oxidase is part of the electron transfer chain. And in fact, it's like the terminal electron receiver. And the theory is that the photonic energy, so the photons of light, almost are feeding into that pathway. And this has the effect of causing the production of more of the energy molecule. So of course, if you have more energy available to the cell, you can do a lot more things, including healing.
Yeah.
So increased energy, number one, that's the thing that most people focus on when they're looking at red light therapies. You get more energy. Even that alone is enough to account for a lot of what's going on with the healing. But of course, the body is never as simple as that. And there's a huge cascade of effects that happens when you shine red light onto different photoreceptors, because there are also photoreceptors. And when I say photoreceptor, I just mean some kind of molecule that will accept light and turn it into a different energy.
Yeah.
So there are photoreceptors like in the blood. Water is a photoreceptor. Water does things when you change it to. So although you have this main theory that it's all happening in the mitochondria, in the mitochondrial membrane, I think also there are other things going on in the blood. There's a charging effect on the water. And of course, we're on a genetics podcast. This has a lot of downstream effects. There's a lot of retrograde signaling that is occurring because of what's going on in the mitochondria. You have this communication between the mitochondria and the cell nucleus. And of course, we know that the mitochondria has its own DNA, which is different to the cellular DNA. So I think what's happening in a way is that the mitochondria are acting as sensors for the environment to tell the cell what's going on so that the cell can make the relevant adaptations that it needs to make. We talk about epigenetic changes that are going on, that not changing the DNA, but changing the expression of certain genes.
Yeah.
And photobiomodulation, again, this is a new field of research. It's fairly new, but looking at how does shining light on the mitochondria cause different methylation? How does it change histones? How does that work with the immune system? How does it work with stem cells? Stem cells, there's a huge science now about stem cells and the healing properties. I'm a little bit focused on the brain. I'm a bit of a brain.
Yeah.
So especially with things like brain disease and neurodegeneration, can you shine light on some part of the body and cause differentiation, production, mobility, transportation of stem cells? Of course, that's hugely beneficial. Yeah. But not even just for the brain, if you're shining light on the gut or on a damaged elbow or on a knee, you're giving a different message to the body and the body will adjust accordingly. So to me, it's a hugely exciting science, because although we're starting to look at various mechanisms and getting very granular, the body doesn't work just one mechanism at a time.
Right.
The whole body is a whole interconnected system. And you cause one little change, it has knock-on effects that we're with our small minds. We're trying to understand this hugely complex process that's going on. But certainly, I think increased energy, increased reactive oxygen species, which again could be in the signaling. Nitric oxide is released in small bursts. So again, people look at that and say, okay, maybe you're then getting a dilation of blood vessels. More blood is getting to the area. Again, more energy, more blood to the area, more oxygen. A brilliant combination for healing right there.
Right. Yeah. Oh, thanks, Sarah. That was a great explanation. And I loved how you talked about the mitochondria, of course, that powerhouse of the cell, so important, and how the mitochondria has its own DNA, which I think a lot of people don't think about in that replication process, where we're in a place of toxicity and our mitochondria is not replicating because it doesn't have enough fuel, so to speak, or a toxic cell. So just to recap that, the red light therapy can then help those cells in lots of different ways. And you said it's igniting maybe like that rocket ship that we don't even know the downstream benefits over time.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And I think mitochondrial biology and a lot of chronic illness could be caused by just these small organelles not functioning properly, not, like you say, they're not producing. There's even some very interesting science coming out about free floating mitochondria, that the red light actually causes them to move to a different area where the healing may be needed. Because we think of mitochondria as being restrained to the new evidence is suggesting that this is not the case. There are actually, especially in the brain, mitochondria which are more mobile. If you're having that positive effect on the mitochondria with the red light, then this opens the doorway for a lot of different healing mechanisms to occur with red light therapy.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. I love how our brain, there's so many different aspects of the brain. We have no clue what's happening. Yeah. It's like we have this massive brain. We're only using a part of it, but we're learning so much more. And I really like how you mentioned that the mitochondria, now we're learning more about the mitochondria. And especially you talked about that ATP powerhouse, right? Got to have that ignition of the ATP to allow that fuel throughout the body. And so many people are looking for more energy, lots of different reasons, right? From that chronic disease perspective, also from that biohacking perspective. How can we engage our body more to have more energy, to do all the things we love to do?
That's right. The body is a very intelligent system, an amazingly complex but intelligent system, and it will use the energy for where it's needed. This is why I think people are a bit surprised with red light therapy, because they ask, oh, what is it for? It's no use looking at a symptom base, because basically almost every chronic condition, illness, comes from a lack of energy. If you give the body the energy that it needs, if you give the body more ATP, the body will put that to work where it's needed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we can't run without energy, just like a car, right? If the car doesn't have the fuel, it's just going to sit in the driveway. And it's the same with our body. And when we're talking from that chronic disease perspective, if we don't have the ignition, like you said, with the red light therapy, those cells that need the healing are going to almost be like in that dormant state where they're not like being helped in that healing process.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So I think that's how that's the healing side of it. Like I say, there's a whole nother science looking at how the red light changes the structure of water. And this is something that you almost have to bring in another science. You almost have to bring in physics, or at least quantum physics, when you're thinking about this, because then you have to start to look at charge on surface. Yeah. And again, it's interesting in our language that we use those terms. Like you said, how do you supercharge? But that really is what's happening when you shine light onto water that's next to a surface like a cell membrane. You change the charge. And so then that really is very much like a battery. If you increase the differential between 2 points in the body, is able to generate more charge, literally. So again, very interesting. This goes back to, like you're saying, my background was looking at charge and how the body, for example, the lungs work when you have different charge. Everything works better when it's charged up. So I think it's that combination of, we mustn't get too granular and just look at certain molecules. We also need to keep a physics perspective and hey, the body is based on charge. There's something in biology called your redox potential, your ability to either reduce or oxidize. The greater your potential to hold a charge, the more healthy you're going to be.
Exactly. I love that you talked about that redox reaction. And that's a great segue for, let's talk about a little bit about detoxification, because I think that's a really important aspect of red light therapy, which you mentioned a little bit. But how does the red light therapy specifically affect the physical body from the perspective of detoxification? detoxification? Does it help those cells to give a couple different perspectives? Does it like help those cells to that are damaged move through the body more quickly? Does it help to create more cells that are, which you'd mentioned, that are in this, let's quote unquote, like happy place where they're functioning well? Or does it help to do both of that at the same time to help that through that water that you mentioned, through that water therapy, helping those things to move through the system and eliminate through those organs of elimination?
I think, firstly, we talked about increased blood flow. Obviously, you are able to remove waste products more efficiently. So I think that's one aspect there. Also, there's a lot of research now about the lymph system, how the lymph system works. And of course, that there's a lot of that work. It's water. It's very watery. That, again, is working on charge, how that lymph system is pushed around the body. It's you walking, but it's also how charged you are in the body.
Yeah.
I'm doing some research now looking at the glymphatic system, which is that part of the way that the body detoxes, specifically the brain. So the glymphatic system is in the spinal cord and the brain. You have fluid that flushes to and fro over the brain. They're now starting to show that you have improvements in that system with red light therapy. Yeah. Is that to do with the charge? I think probably that's a big component, because you need something to get where most of this happens while we're asleep. There's something that's making this flush happen in the body, and it's the charge in the body. So I think that combination of increased blood flow, increased oxygenation, and increased charge is having this major detox effect with red light therapy.
Oh, that's great. And I love that you mentioned the aspect of the brain and the fluid. People don't think of, from the people that don't have a lot of knowledge about science, right? They don't think about this fluid that's running back and forth through the brain, through the spinal column, that's energizing our body and part of that neurocommunication, telling our body what to do. And if we're not hydrated and that water is not supercharged, because so much of our body, water and electricity. And if we're not igniting that and having that movement, the brain is not going to be able to function. So I can have that thought process, that cognition, that memory, that brain fog that people complain about, right? We want to be able to turn on the volume and have it be at full force when we're ready to use our brain.
That's right. And I think certainly for neurodegeneration, there's a lot of debris. I'm doing like quote unquote debris. There's stuff that there are misfolded proteins. There's stuff that, that we would think that the brain would want to clear out. But for some reason, especially in Alzheimer's, they find a lot of this protein parts. And yes, I think it's actually a crucial part for how we function, is that we have a very good way of detoxing the cells. And to do that, you do need good functioning mitochondria, good energy, good blood flow, like you say, correct hydration, whatever that means. Yeah, good water in, and also charging the water, which is where the light comes in.
Yeah, so important. And I liked how you mentioned the Alzheimer's. When I was in medical school, we worked on cadavers, and I was so fascinated because you could actually see with the patients that had Alzheimer's, the degeneration of the frontal lobe of the brain. And I was just like, to me, that was like mind blowing to see, because you can see that. And I think it's more, you just expect that if somebody has cirrhosis of the liver or something. But when I could actually see the shrinking of the brain, I was like, no wonder that those people that are affected from early signs of dementia and Alzheimer's have a change in the way they're thinking, because the brain is actually shifting in size and changing and degenerating. And so it sounds like red light therapy then can be very helpful for mental and for helping those that. So does it help with the detoxification of the brain and for the amyloid plaques, like for specific metals that might be in the system that can be affecting the brain and the body, like a heavy metal detoxification?
I would think so. I don't know if I can say it does.
Right. We don't know if it's, we hasn't been studied, right? Quote unquote again, studied yet.
Yeah, that's right. There is actually a lot of research going on with neurodegeneration, Alzheimer's. I was actually involved in the data collection for a Parkinson's study where they got some excellent results using near infrared. So I think, yes, there is obviously something going on to have that reversal of symptoms. There is obviously, like you say, it could be one of those things that you mentioned, or all of it. We're still at an early stage, but certainly using red light therapy consistently over a number of months, this particular study was 3 months, does show a significant improvement in symptoms of conditions.
Yeah, and that is a big part of the communication with the brain. And because the neurological system is affected with Parkinson's, they're having tremors and different changes in their gait. And so how that body's affected from that cellular space is very important. So like you said, it's not necessarily documented from the Alzheimer's perspective, but we can see how it's been studied with other neurological diseases, and they're similar in how
it is being studied with Alzheimer's. It's just like the level of, it's very difficult to before and after how much heavy metals is in someone's brain.
Right. Because
people open to see. But from a Parkinson's point of view, I became very interested recently in the role of the gut, certainly in Parkinson's disease, but in almost every kind of, even just like people who have got brain fog, memory loss, poor concentration. So I've started looking a lot more about targeting the gut for brain. There's a lot of stuff in the literature about leaky gut, leaky brain, the vagus nerve, which is a nerve that's called vagus because it's wandering, it's in vagabond. And it goes all around. It goes gut and around the organs, but actually then up to the brain. And so there is now some, if you shine light on the area, you are shining light on that nerve. And that is just a highway between the gut and the brain. There's a constant communication between these systems. And certainly people have found with doing things that help them heal their gut, they have a better brain.
Totally.
That's what's going on. And vice versa. It's a two-way street, of course, but certainly for Parkinson's disease. And that's why this device that I'm coming out with, I've got a gut, because one, it's easier to get light through the gut because you don't have to worry about our brains, cranium. And although actually the skull is fairly transparent to some of the frequencies of near infrared light specifically, it's a lot easier to have a pad on the gut that you're getting a lot more of the photons are going through. There's a lot of blood there. You're targeting the blood vessels and also the microbiome. There's a whole new science called Photobiomics, looking at how the mitochondria are influenced by the light environment that you're surrounded by. And certainly there's some excellent work coming out of Sydney University right now, where finding that remote photobiomodulation, so that's shining a light on a part of the body to have an effect on a different part of the body. If you shine light on the gut, that you do have an influence on brain health.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And like you said, with the vagus nerve, it's connected through our whole body, right? The cardiovascular system, the gut. I have a lot of patients who will have gut issues and cardiovascular issues together. I'm like, that's because there's a nerve that goes through that system and it's going to be affected. And like you said, when we work on the gut, of course, everything always starts at the gut, and it's easy for us to get to it. I think that's our power center when we're talking about vibrational medicine, and it's easy for us to receive from the gut. It's hard. We can receive, but it's a little different, right? It's just a different, like you said, through that cranium. And I love how you mentioned that it is this kind of surface that is see-through, right? It's able to absorb the light. And I think that's really important for people to understand. And so you mentioned a little bit, this is the CERA unit, right? The CERA, did I say it right? The CERA red light system that you're talking about, the gut-brain connection. Yeah, let's talk about that. And so this system, so it has one piece that you put onto the stomach. That's correct?
Yes.
And then another piece that you put on the brain.
That's right. And then, that's right. It's a two-pronged approach to brain wellness, but also, like I say, to gut wellness, because you can't separate out these systems in the body, optimize it, but also people with leaky gut, the whole thing. And like you say, there's a heart-brain connection. So of course, but yes, the system is a flexible light panel that goes over the abdomen, that goes over the gut, which is important when you're looking at red light devices, to have something that is flexible and fits close to the body.
Yeah.
Because light always travels in a straight line. And so if you don't have, the light is not going to bend to you. You have to bend the light, curve round and hit you in the right place. So having a flexible pad is important, flush to the skin, so that all the photons are going in the correct alignment. And then also having the brain device, you are also treating directly and remotely. So it's a two-pronged approach. And with the brain device, I've used some of those higher wavelengths. So I have 4 different wavelengths, because as I said, so to get the maximum chance of getting the correct wavelength of light to the brain, you need to have a lot of different wavelengths going in. So I have 4 different red wavelengths that are going into the brain and into the forehead, because hair is a great scatterer of light.
Yes, it
so
is.
It depends how much hair you've got, of course, and what color it is. Into the forehead, I have got a little one on the back, because some light does go through, but the majority, you need to have it flush against bare skin. And that way you're doing both. Very easy. You just put it on. There's no wires. It's all chargeable. There's no Bluetooth. You can turn that off, or you can have them running together, whatever your preference is. But to just sit for 10 minutes and to run a program on your gut brain, that's an excellent way to really cover all your bases. You're getting light to the brain, you're healing your gut at the same time. Just a little bit of information about modifications to diet, good sleep, all of this stuff is out there. Maximize your chances of a good brain. I'm sure there's lots of people on your podcast who've given some really excellent, very simple tips. Sleep well, eat well, good relationships, and then these simple hacks that you can do. You can really optimize what's going on in your brain, which doesn't want a good brain, especially right now. We need to be filtering this information. We need to be making good choices.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, this is a great time for us to learn more about charging our brain and accessing it, like you said. And so when you're wearing the patch or the item on the stomach, over the abdomen, and then also over the forehead. And then you said 10 minutes. Is this something that you need to work up to? Say you've never done any type of red light therapy before, or maybe you haven't done any type of therapy before. Maybe you're like totally new to doing things. Is it something you want to work slowly up to, like maybe a minute, and then you work up to it? How often can you use the therapy? Can you use it a couple different times a day if you're feeling fatigued or if you're having some digestive complaints? What would that look like? Is there a specific protocol? I know that was a lot of questions. Yeah.
No, it's all good. This particular device, it's erring on the side of caution in that it's giving, for the 10-minute dose, it's giving an efficacious dose, but not too much of a dose. With light, there is something called a biphasic dose response. And by that, I just mean you can have too much of a good thing. You need to have enough that you move the needle and that you get the cells going, but you don't want to really overdo it, because what happens then is the body starts producing waste products faster than it can remove them, because you know, if you get something going, it's like exercise. You want to start running, but if you lift weights all day, every day, you're going to strain something.
Right. Little by little.
So yes, people can definitely ramp up the light as they choose. And actually that your body will start to upregulate the receptors for light, which is the brilliant thing, because the body's very clever and it learns. You may just need a little bit of light to start with, but the body will start to upregulate those enzymes and you will be able to use more light as you go along.
Great.
So the protocol is really, like you say, depending on how ill you are, how much depletion of mitochondria you have. You can do it just once a week or you can do it daily. So it's just a case of knowing yourself and knowing where you're at. I think most people know a little bit, okay, I've let myself really get run down.
Take it easy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good thing. And there are people who do brain coaching. I work with an excellent doctor, Dr. Joan, who does for people who are really quite ill and want to be led through it. You can get a coach who will then monitor different things, because I think that's another thing that's excellent about the biohacking movement is monitoring. How do you know if something's too much? I have a ring that I use. It's an Aura ring that I will check my heart rate variability on best metrics for understanding where you're at health wise. If I'm doing that and my heart rate variability is not slowly improving, then I might up the dose.
Yeah.
If I'm doing a ton of stuff and I find my heart rate variability is tanking down, then maybe it's time to chill a bit, rest and recover. That's something, maybe people are at the stage where they can self-monitor. Maybe people need to get a health coach to take them through that. But I think even just having that awareness, I do the light therapy, how do I feel? So do I feel a bit wiped out?
Right.
Self-aware, of course, awareness. That's all we're trying to get. Then you can make the better choices once you have that awareness. So I think certainly people need to have some kind of self-monitoring, even if it's only just a little diary, or there's so many of these Fitbits and Garmins and BioStraps. There are so many things you can use.
Yeah.
Or get someone to help.
Yeah. I really like that, Sarah. And what you said too, listening to yourself, but also sometimes when we're in that detoxification space, if we have that volume or that speed, like of the hose turned on too much, it can make us feel depleted. And so having slow increase of mitochondria and energy can sometimes be better for someone. And it's all individualized, and working with someone, a professional who can help guide you, especially in that chronic ill state, can be important for sure. I'd love for us to talk a little bit about, you mentioned sleep, and let's backtrack to that. How is affecting our sleep? Because I know that's a huge, I think in the United States, we had a study that was done that 75% of all Americans have a sleep disorder. And I was just like blown away by that. And I see that with almost all my patients have some sleep issue, whether that's hormonal or chronic pain or anxiety or depression. There's so many different variables. So how affecting our sleep rhythm, and then how can red light therapy then help shift that?
Yeah, again, that's another whole massive topic that, another favorite topic of mine. But basically, as I said, we've only very recently had artificial lighting. Really, what are we talking about? A few hundred years compared to 200,000 years of evolution. And for that time, we would rise with the sun and we would go to bed when it gets dark, because that's
wasn't anything else to do.
That's the kind of animals we are when the lights go out. And still, the evolution of our body is adapted to that. So when you go outside and you see the sunrise, which is mainly red and near infrared spectrum because of the position of the sun, that sets off a whole cascade of reaction. And one of the things that does is it starts the body to produce hormones, including melanin, which is the hormone of darkness, which is the one that you need to sleep. But funny, you start the production of that when you see the red light in the morning. The red light in the morning also changes your skin chemistry. It's preparing your body for the UV light of the solar noon. The red light actually has an effect on your skin chemistry to enable you to be outside in the middle of the day. And I think that's why some people they cover themselves in high factor sun cream when they're going out in the middle of the day, but it's because you haven't seen the sunrise, so your body's not ready, so it burns. If you really want to get the OG, the original red light therapy, go and see the sunrise. That one thing alone sets up the body for a good night's sleep, because everything starts when you start in the morning. What's the first thing you do? So the red light of the sun, and then we have more blue light in the day, and blue light stimulates dopamine, and it helps us make all those neurotransmitters that make us active and want to do things for food. But if you're then looking at a blue screen at night before you go to bed, what are you telling your body?
Who does that?
Netflix, anyone?
Right.
So what we're telling, it's the middle of the day, forage for food. So of course, what do? We go and forage for food, except we don't anymore. We just open the fridge.
Snackathon.
Snacks. Then you start eating snacks. And then of course, your body is becoming wired, because why do you eat food? To enable you to do manual work, to do stuff. Really, I think that's a lot of reasons why we have all these sleep problems, is because people are giving their body such mixed messages about what they're actually doing physiologically. From a point of view of prioritizing sleep, is to try as much as possible to go with natural cycles. Try and not see technology before you go to bed, or if you have to do that Zoom call or whatever, there are filters that you can get to put on your computer that will filter out the blue spectrum. I use one called Flux, but I know there's all different ones. You can put a blue filter on your phone.
They're coming out with a lot of
glasses, a lot of very interesting things. And then the red light actually activates the parasympathetic response, which is where you need to be to go to sleep. So I know I have all different red lights. This device that we're talking about, the Sarah system, is actually not in production yet. It's launching next year. That's why I'm so excited. But in the meantime, I have a lot of like pads and panels and things that I do use in the evening as part of my wind down. You can have red light, because getting the body into that parasympathetic rest, I'm ready to sleep mode is crucial. And I think, of course, everybody knows you need a good night's sleep, but now becoming linked to so many chronic illnesses, it's like, you really do need to get a good night's sleep. And we were talking about that flushing of toxins. That only happens in sleep. And that only happens in certain phases of sleep. And you need to sleep for a good period in order for that to complete. If you are not prioritizing your sleep, watching blue light, maybe sleeping fitfully, missing the sunrise, not only do you feel tired, but potentially you're building up all this debris in your body and brain, because that's when you get rid of it. So I think, certainly using red light as a substitute maybe for sunrise and sunset. If you really can't get out, there are people who are maybe in elderly homes and they can't get out. That would be an excellent time to use these devices. Most of us can get out at sunrise and see the sunset. It's just about shifting your day a little bit and then using the red light. Just making it happen. It's something that I've tried to do. I live all over the place. I'm here in Miami, and it's fairly easy to do that. When I go back to the UK, the sun doesn't even come up till 9:30. So you have to shift your day around a little bit, or it comes up at 5 o'clock in the morning in the summer. But that is how we have lived. That is how we have lived. And this is how the body wants to operate. And that's why it's biohacking. You're hacking that system by using different tech. But I think as much as possible, it's about prioritizing those natural rhythms. And then where you can't, or where you're in a different situation, or if you want to top up on that, using these technologies.
That's great. Thank you, Sarah, for that explanation about sleep, because it's so important. And I think people just don't even understand when they're having insomnia or sleep, how far back it's connected, all the different pathways. And I really liked how you connected to that beginning of time. As we've been evolving as humans, we have seen a lot of different changes. And now we're at this new place where, okay, we have all these different devices. How are we going to have that be a part of our life where we can use them, but still have the best body that we can have moving forward, so that we age boldly, right? We are moving into this state where we're like, we have the best bodies ever for aging, which I think is that's where I'm at with patients. There shouldn't be this whole persona of as we age, we decline and our body goes into the toilet. That is such old thought process. We want to have the best body moving forward. We want to be able to live as long as we want, which might not be right.
You want to live you want to live a really good long life, but a healthy long life. Nobody wants to live to 150 and spend not quality of life as you get forward in age. And I think that's the most important thing is, okay, how can I age gracefully, if you like? How can I age but keep my body as healthy as it can be?
Yeah, so true. So true. Yeah. And one thing that you mentioned too, Sarah, I'd love for us to talk about for a minute as we're wrapping things up today, is you talked about vitamins and vitamin D. So with that light process, so you talked about we're having a different way we're working and absorbing things. Can red light therapy, because you talked about the body as being this light receptor. We have all these different receptors on our body can we vitamins in a specific way when we're using red light therapy? Will it help us, especially patients that have malabsorption in the gut? The SARA system, is that how you say it? SARA, is it CERA or SARA? The SARA system?
No, it's Sarah. You know, it sounds a bit egocentric that I'm Sarah and I called it the Sarah system. I just want to make sure. It's a little bit, I know, it's all about me. It's all about me. But it's just because I went through so many kinds of names to do with light. And also it's a bit of play on cerebellum, cerebral, at the brain. Yes, you're right. It is the SARA system. But yes, but with regards to vitamin D, you need UV light to make vitamin D. You have the precursors in your body, and then the body will then synthesize a bioavailable form of vitamin D when it comes in contact with UV. No, you're not going to produce more UV using red light devices. However, as I've said, that what red light does is it conditions your skin. It changes your skin chemistry. And without getting into too much detail, there's all kinds of things, sulfation of cholesterol and different things that happen when you use red and near infrared light that make the body in a better position to make that conversion of the vitamin D2 and D3. So no, you are not going to produce vitamin D because you need that reaction. However, you are going to set your body up to be more receptive to that conversion when you do go out and get the sun. And it's the same for if you went in sunlight. If you go in sunlight, you change your skin chemistry, and when you get that UV, you're better able to synthesize those vitamins that you need. So everything is connected. Everything is interrelated in the body. But yeah, there's a lot of interest around vitamin D right now, just because it's so important, especially is to protect the body from viruses. You need to have good vitamin D levels in the body. So you need to be eating good stuff that's going to be precursors for the vitamin D, and you need to be exposed to some kind of daylight. And let's say I'm from England, we don't always get sunny days. In fact, more often than not, we don't. You still being outside in under the sky, you are still getting those frequencies which are going to help. There are periods in the Northern Hemisphere where you can't make any vitamin D at all because so you either need to make sure that you really get the stores up in your body in the summer, you have it there, or some kind of supplementation is probably wise for those places where you don't get very much UV in the winter.
So key, so important. I love that. And as a side point to that, it's great to get your vitamin D tested, right? To see, we were talking about testing earlier, and that's important because so many people are seeing vitamin D deficiencies, and especially as we move into the winter where you live. I used to live in Seattle. All those factors come into play. So discussing that with your health practitioner is important to make sure that you're having the right amount of vitamin D and what is best for you.
Yeah, it's about educating yourself. Of course, like we say, it's about taking responsibility. I have a really cool app on my phone called D-Minder, and you just put in where you are, and it calculates based on the latitude of wherever you are, how much vitamin D you can make on that day and when to be out. I'm sure in Miami, just 10 minutes standing outside in the sun is going to be enough. If you're going somewhere else, because the position of where you are on the planet, you may need to be out for a few hours to get that same amount of vitamin D. It's a very easy bit of tech. It's just an app on your phone, and then you can educate yourself on vitamin. And because of that, I do supplement when I'm in the UK, but I try and do it with food form. There are a lot of very interesting medicinal mushrooms which have high levels of D that you can take in coffee or in tea or in powder form, or you can introduce things into your diet. Fish, if you have oily fish, then you see, okay, the indigenous diets. Of course, in England we eat a lot of fish and chips. Counts as a health food, doesn't make up for these losses. So I think it's all about where is your environment? How can you be the best person that you can be in that environment? Not only is it about personalized medicine, but it's also geographical. If you go somewhere else and live somewhere else, you may need to adapt what you're doing.
So true. I love that. You said it was called D-Minder, like MIDER? Is that what you said it was?
Yeah. It's a simple app, and it just tells you on a certain day, tell it where you are, and it'll say, okay, no chance of vitamin D for you today, or Miami to the shop, and you're done.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. And one last question, and then we'll talk about how people can find out more about the SARA red light therapy and find you. So if you had an unlimited budget right now, this might be leading into what we're going to be talking about, but if you had an unlimited budget right now, what would you do to make the biggest impact on the planet?
On the planet? Oh, I would put a ton of research money into this space, into people who are looking at mitochondrial medicine, environmental medicine, photomedicine, because I think it really is the medicine of the future, just being held back because there just isn't the funding. We do live in a very pharmaceutical age, and I'm not big pharma bashing. It's just where we're at, because that's just how we got there, by looking at things in that kind of very mechanistic way. So yes, if I suddenly won millions and millions on the lottery, that's what I would be doing, because there are some excellent researchers there. It's all shoestring stuff. So I think that would have I think that would push humanity forward.
I love that. Yeah, that's a great one. It's so needed. And like you said, pharmaceuticals have a place. They were created for a specific purpose. They've just been blown out of that perspective. And now people are waking up, so to speak, and they're saying like, okay, I want to shift my body. I want to be empowered. And how can I do that? And giving the money to alternative therapies is so important. And so if you're listening out there and you have a bucket load of money you want to, let's talk about your campaign. So first of all, tell people how they can find you, how they can follow you, and find out more about the Sarah unit. And then also how they can support the development and launch into 2022.
The easiest way people can help, right? I'm going to be launching this on Indiegogo, which is a crowdfunding site. So people can just go to sarahthrive.com and there's just a link. And then as soon as this Indiegogo page goes live, people can just sign up and pledge their support. That's the way it works. It's like crowdfunding. It's like biohacking for launching a product, citizen science. So you can go on, you can just leave a message, or the Sarah system, it's a very discounted price to start with. So it's going to be just $5.99, I think, on the crowdfunding side. Totally cool for these two high-tech devices. Yeah. So I think the best way is for people just to go on sarahthrive.com and sign up, and then I can start messaging people with updates and telling people what's going on. Or of course, I have social media, Sarah Thrive on LinkedIn and Sarah Thrive Facebook and all the usual IG, all the usual things. And I also have a podcast, which is Rebel Scientist, where I try and put out a similar message too.
Wow, that's great, Sarah. Yeah, your podcast is awesome. And so people can find that on Apple and listen and tune in and learn more about how red light therapy is so beneficial for the body. That's a great way. Okay, I'll put all of that in the show notes for everyone that's listening, so you can easily go to Sarah's page and find out. And on the sarahthrive.com, you can sign up for the newsletter, correct? And then you can be, when the newest information is coming about, when the Sarah device is going to be available, you'll be in the know. Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much, Sarah. It was a joy to have you on the show today. I love learning about red light therapy and I can't wait to share it with the world.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure talking to you.